Why do old people increasingly feel overwhelmed with uncertainty and anxiety? Welcome, Swagatham, Vanakkam. Surely, irrespective of how old or young you are, you will be interested in this question. Also, I'm pretty sure that you would have noticed that people, as they grow older, become old and then older, because you can grow older even at 5. If instead of 6 years, and so 5 years you become 6 years old, then you're older by 1 year. So older does not necessarily mean that you're old. So first you become old, then you grow older. I'm talking about people in that bracket. Almost everyone I have interacted with, almost everyone, is plagued with anxiety about whether or not that person will surely inherit heaven. Correspondingly, is that person headed towards insufferably warm hospitality in a place designated as hell? I'm sure this has come to your notice. This has made you wonder, ponder, think, reflect, as it has made me. So you would be interested in what I have to say on the subject. And I want to thank you in advance for it. Now, most people assume that to the extent that a believer is characterized by faith, and faith being defined as the assurance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, faith has the power to abolish anxiety and to breed inner tranquility. I'm speaking slowly, deliberately, so that these ideas and words can sink into us, because it is necessary for us to think through. If it is to impress you with some outpouring of words or to entertain you with some twists and turns of speech, then my approach would be different. We are here neither to entertain nor to impress. We are here to think together. And I'm thinking even as I'm establishing this imaginative, though technological contact with you. Now, this is a theory. The theory that if you have faith, you will not fear. Faith abolishes fear. But then think of this way. You need faith most when you enter your old age. Or your faith is apt to be more intense, genuine, sincere, and complete, or at least mature, when you become old. There's a far greater chance that your faith is more mature when you're old than when you're young. I don't think there is any scope for serious disagreement on this. There are always exceptions to any generalization. But that's a very small percentage. Leave that aside. I'm talking about the broad run of things. So if this observation is correct, if this is the reality, then as per the existing assumption, namely that faith abolishes fear, then it stands to logic that old age must be completely free from the incursion of fear, or it should be free from the affliction of fear. And yet, every evidence that we have, or at least 99% of the evidence that we have, is exactly to the contrary. It is in old age that people feel most afflicted, most tormented by these anxieties. Surely this is something for which there must be an explanation. And my understanding of the subject is as follows. When you are young, and even in your middle age, say I'm talking about the period from 15 to 55, if you like, or even 60. Because today life expectancy being what it is, you could still feel young when you are 60. Therefore, I am spreading it up to 60. When you are young, you really don't pay much attention to what faith means and what the substance of your faith is, what its application is, the grounds for your faith. You don't even examine yourself in respect of faith and ascertain whether or not really you have faith or you believe what is being posited in theory, what is being preached, proclaimed, what is being cycled, recycled. You don't. Most people live their life, irrespective of which religion they practice, on the basis of the prevailing culture and according to the resources of the material world. If we are honest to ourselves, we'll admit that irrespective of which religion you believe in or practice, or you think you practice, your matters or articles of faith have no bearing whatsoever on your life, on your work, on your relationships, on the social dimension of your life and activities, your political convictions, what you live for. And therefore, even though the most important aspect or the important matter concerning faith is faith concerning life after death, or faith concerning posthumous life, life after death. When we are young, during this period that I've already mentioned, pay scant practical attention to whether or not the faith that we think that we entertain is real. We never examine ourselves in relation to this question, do I have faith? Am I a person of faith? Am I really a believer? Am I a person of faith? If I'm a person of faith, in what respect, to what extent, in what sense? Everything is taken for granted, and we drift from day to day, carrying this label of one religion or the other. And there is a reason for it. I'm not blaming anyone at all. I'm saying that this is quite reasonable, very natural. And it would be surprising if it's otherwise than what I'm saying. The reason is simple. Think of life after death. Think of concepts like heaven and hell. Think even of the immortality of the human soul. Of all concepts, the one that I find easier to believe is the immortality of the soul. But I have to be honest with you that my thinking on the immortality of the human soul began to pick up only after I crossed 50, around that time. Even though I became a priest at the age of 32, thoughts about the immortality of the human soul played a very, very vague, insignificant role in my idea and practice of Christianity. I have preached about it. So I have thought about the subject only for purposes of preaching, not for living. I preached immortality of the soul, but I did not live immortality of the soul. I'm making an honest confession. Others may or may not make a similar confession. That's up to them, whether or not they want to own up the truth. The fact that somebody preaches and preaches with seeming passion and great conviction does not mean that that person believes in what he is preaching. That's why Jesus, of course, knew this. Therefore, he said about the Pharisees, do as they tell you to do, but don't do as they do. Because their life will be a living contradiction of what they preach. This goes for the priestly class in general, and it can never be otherwise. And there's one safe generalization you can make, that as far as the priestly class is concerned, there will always be an ineradicable gulf between theory and practice. And that's why Jesus associated the priestly class only with hypocrisy. When Jesus looked at them, he said, hypocrites, hypocrites, hypocrites. This is the reason for it. So, for a long period in my life, in fact, the most important part of my life, matters concerning my faith, which actually even I thought I took seriously, but it's now in retrospect that I realized that I did not. They made no difference in my life. Why? Because these are very distant prospects or possibilities, about which there is absolutely no experience of any kind. Oh, you can always say that, well, Jesus has said that there is life after death. Jesus talked about, the greatness, the immortality of the soul. Yes, that's all fine. It's all there. No question about it. My point is, please understand it very clearly. My point is that these references are not there. My point is not that Jesus was ignorant about it or did not say a word about it. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, irrespective of all that Jesus said and what Paul taught and what other men and women of great spiritual insight said after them, there's a great cloud of witness, as the writer of Hebrews says. It's all there. These things really played no practical role, made no real difference in my life. Why? Because they were so distant to my life. And I had no personal experience of any kind, or anything which is even related to this. I had no experience related to heaven. I had no experience related to hell. I really had no experience related to the immortality of the soul. Though, as I said, now and then I would have an intuition, because whenever I became aware of the greatness of life, I felt that this wonderful element, which is like nothing else in this world, cannot just perish. So it was only an inference from this occasional intuitional kind of enlightenment that I came to the conclusion that there is life after death, that the soul will not perish. Though whenever I thought about the body, I knew it would perish. Whenever I thought about the mind, I knew it would perish. Now, therefore, I'm stating a very simple, practical reality. That is, nobody, let me say this to you, absolutely nobody can repose their faith in that which is far, far, far away from them, number one. Number two, about which there is absolutely no clear understanding. Who can claim that he or she understands heaven? There are many Christians who would say, oh, I know heaven, I've been to heaven, and that kind of thing. These things are acceptable as nice jokes. Who has experienced hell? Well, metaphorically, you can say, I've experienced heaven and hell on this earth. That's a different kind of idea. That's not the idea we're talking about. We're talking about how literally these concepts are understood. Who has handled his life, even for one full day, strategizing that day on the assumption of the immortality of the soul? Who has let faith in the immortality of the soul influence any important decision in life? When you ask questions like that, you hit the dead end. But when you are young, these things don't matter to you, as they did not matter to me, because I had material resources, physical energy, intellectual energy, the wherewithal to manage my life upon this earth. So long as my concern is with life upon this earth, as a human being, I'm extremely unlikely to stay engaged with heaven or hell or the immortality of the soul. But what happens? As years roll by, as decades move, and you proceed towards your old age, your relationship with the material world, the physical world begins to weaken. Slowly, your contacts are cut. You know that your physical energy is draining out. You know that it's not now possible to deal with this emerging situation, including increasing physical disability, inadequacy, the possibility of being left alone, abandoned, becoming redundant, becoming helpless, or being in a state where you need other people's care, attention, charity. All these things aggravate your anxiety and your helplessness. At that point in time, even as the world fails you, you want to now relocate your focus onto something else. That is when you really think about the world to come. Then you face the problem. The problem is that you try to grab something and it is just smoke. There's nothing there. Whether or not this was real did not matter to you 50 years ago, 40 years ago, but it matters a great deal now. It is now at this point in time, as you decline into the vale of years, that you need guarantees or assurances about heaven, understanding about heaven and hell, if you like, and assurance about life after death. If there's no life after death, then heaven and hell don't matter. Now, in that context, remember the typical definition of faith. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. If you had faith, if you have faith now, then you shouldn't have that problem. If you ever had that faith would benefit you even now. You never had that faith. And therefore, you don't have that faith now. It's too late for you really to cultivate that faith. Frankly, I have to say this to you. I feel very amused when I hear funeral speeches made by priests. Among Christians, probably this is true about other religions, practitioners of other religions as well, I don't know. Among Christians, it is customary to use very nice, pious words without meaning a thing. A person who has led an utterly materialistic, worldly life, he dies, and the priest comes in his pietistic attitude, makes a speech, and he says, "This our brother was departed this world in the faith and fear of God." Whereas faith may have had nothing to do with this life. And the person who uses these words himself does not know what he's talking about. What does faith mean? How does it apply? How did it apply to the person whose corpse is now in front of him? And what does it mean to this person or the soul now departed in relation to this kind of unverifiable prospects? No idea. So religion is one context where you can actually recycle words without paying any attention to meanings. You really can't do this in any other field of human life, not even in politics, where telling lies is quite the norm. Still, there must be some meaning attached to your words. Somebody will ask you a question. Now, suppose I'm making a funeral speech and I'm saying this George Guti, who has now departed from our midst, now rests in the bosom of Jesus, in whom he reposed his faith. Nobody will ask me a question. On what basis are you saying this nonsense? Nobody. I can say anything and get away with it. But leave alone funeral speeches, which are very solemn and gloomy occasions. Even when I make a convention speech or a Sunday sermon, say what you like. Nobody will ask you a question. Therefore, these realities are never confronted. They're never raised, they're never confronted. People just go on and on and on till all of a sudden they tumble into their old age. But all these pious assumptions and vague notions just melt away. They're left cold, bare, and naked in this crushing reality of old age and imminent death, which is precisely when they need some assurance. And they try to look for assurance, they find none. That's when they run here, there, everywhere. And they ask the question, what will happen after life, after I die? Will I go to heaven? Will I go to hell? If I go to heaven, will I meet with my dear one? No idea. Complete uncertainty. But the church will never recognize this. The church will never admit that this is the case, because the church does not have the means to handle this reality. Religion as it is organized is nothing but a bundle of make-believe. Make-believe. That is the reason why in the entire practice of organized religion, there is not the slightest occasion for anyone to ask a question. I challenge all of you. Please tell me, how many times have you dared to ask a question with respect to anything that the priest or the bishop said or the leader of your religion said about matters concerning your faith? Very, very unlikely. But thanks to this YouTube fellowship, I'm glad to say many of my friends who are participating in this pilgrimage of seeking have started asking questions. And I thank the good Lord for it. That's a sign that spiritually we are waking up. Jesus said, ask and you will be given. Unfortunately, because of the tricks in translation, in Malayalam it means beg. Ask also means ask questions. Then you'll get answers. I believe we have a duty to ask questions. So anyway, it's a very pathetic reality that people, as they move into their old age, have to face this aggravated anxiety about what is going to befall them. At that point in time, they're completely disowned. There is nobody to minister to them. There is nobody with whom they can share their inner turmoil, their sense of panic, anxiety. It's completely camouflaged, hidden from you. And there is that whole world of private suffering in which old people live. And the only purpose in doing this video is to alert everyone to that reality. If it is possible for any one of us to reach out to people in that state, please do so. You may not be able to assuage their anxieties or answer their many questions. At least you can hold their hand, spend a moment in solidarity with them, and give them a sense that they too matter. And that's doing a lot. Thank you. All the very best.